Hi, I'm Tyler Farah, and welcome to Lesson 8.4, Stress Management. The thing about stress is it's a natural response to anything that is important. In fact, stress can actually be a really strong motivator toward your best performance possible on the MCAT. So a little bit of stress is natural, it's healthy, and it's actually quite helpful. On the other hand, too much stress is both unhealthy and unhelpful. So in this lesson, you're going to learn techniques to help manage your stress and keep it at a reasonable, helpful level leading up to and during test day. Before we begin, it's important to consider there are actually two different kinds of stress. There are those stressors that are under your control or that are intrinsic. Examples might be your weak areas, anxiety about your performance on this exam overall. Because these types of stressor are in your control, we're going to talk first about how to control them. Now, by contrast, there are also those stressors that are out of your control, or extrinsic stressors. Some examples of these might be pressure from your family, maybe a sibling who's already taken the MCAT and gotten a really good score, or maybe just the knowledge that the medical school of your dreams has a very high average MCAT score. The key realization about extrinsic stressors is that because they're out of your hands, there's nothing you can do about them. And the best thing is just to push them out of your mind entirely. Of course, you and I both know that's easier said than done. In fact, me telling you not to think about pressure from your family, for example, is the best way to get you stressed out about that particular stressor. So we'll come back to extrinsic stressors at the end of this lesson, and I'll share some tips for helping you forget about those factors that you cannot control. This first exercise is a celebration of the things that you're already good at. The MCAT is a vast test, and the wealth of topics required can be intimidating and can lead to stress. So in this exercise, list 5 things that you are good at, and if you can keep going from there, do. Notice that the examples that are given list very specific topics like acid-base equilibrium, mitosis and meiosis, rather than vague content areas like general chemistry. Notice also that the examples are not limited to content areas, but instead branch out into broader areas of math and test day skills in general, even including what you might not consider traditional test day skills, like being a good guesser. Use these principles to help you in generating your own list. Attack this task now. Anything that you've listed on this page, that's something you can rely on test day. And in fact, on the exam, most of your points are going to come from your strong areas. So your primary goal from here on is to take weak areas and add them to your strengths. It is, of course, important that you come back to your strengths periodically and practice them and ensure that they remain strong. However, you're going to get a lot of that practice with your strengths every time you take a full-length practice test or any other kind of passage-based practice. So, for now, let's turn to the other side of this exercise and think about your weaknesses and how we can start to turn those weak areas into strengths and add them to this list here. Again, the key to managing stress is to be proactive. So right now, also list out your biggest weak areas. I know that this is painful, but you'll find that listing your weaknesses already makes the list feel more manageable. A list of your top 5 biggest weak areas is a good starting point. If you can keep going from there, feel free to. Use the ideas on screen to jumpstart your own list. Do this now. As the Kaplan tip indicates, the best way to avoid frustration is to attack your weaknesses one at a time. Start at the top of this list, spend an afternoon studying the content area or the skill that you've listed first. Do some practice questions that target that content area or skill. Turn that weakness into a strength. And then the best part, cross it off this page and add it to the previous page, listing your strengths. Feel free to return to these 2 pages frequently, adding to the strengths page and crossing off the weaknesses page. Watching the balance shift between these 2 pages is going to go a long way toward managing your MCAT stress. This next exercise actually carries a lot of weight for me personally.
because on my own MCAT, on the section that's now called the cars section, I fell a little behind the clock, and I remember actually thinking I should just walk out of the test right now and give up. I can't believe I spent months studying for this test and I am bombing it right now. These kinds of disaster scenarios happen. It speaks to the nature of the difficulty of this test. In fact, notice on screen, these exercises don't even say if a passage is unexpectedly hard. They use the language when a passage is unexpectedly hard. The key idea here is you're going to run into unexpected disasters on test day. The best way to manage this difficulty is to imagine in advance how you're going to handle these potential disaster scenarios so that you've got a plan in place on test day. In my own case, when I fell a little behind time, I did something I had done a dozen times in practice in that same scenario. I stopped, I took a big deep breath, and I repeated to myself, if this section feels hard for me, it's got to feel hard for everybody in the country taking the test right now. And then I did the best I could in that section, and you can probably guess how this story is going to end. That actually ended up being my best score overall. So right now, what I want you to do is take a moment and put yourself in some of these potential disaster scenarios and ask yourself, what will I tell myself? What will I do? What will my pep talk be to help me make the best of this bad scenario? And the really cool thing is you're bound to run into some of these difficulties in your practice as well. So you can start to practice your plan for mitigating these disaster scenarios even today. Take a moment and do this right now.
Let's consider some sample responses. Remember though, this exercise is in part about your plan, so whatever you've written is okay. First off, falling behind is never ideal, but I mentioned it happened to me on test day, so it's good to be prepared. The key thing to remember is that you're already saving the hardest passages for the end of the section anyways, which ensures that you've already got a good MCAT score in hand by the time you even get to that last passage. Whether you have the full amount of time for that passage or not, you know you've got the points that are going to get you into medical school. As for hard questions, how many times have you answered a question about a passage and learned a little something about the passage that you didn't already know? Sometimes answering the easier questions first helps you answer the harder questions later. And even if not, at least you've got as many points out of that passage as you're going to get by skipping the hard questions and going towards the easier ones. As well, for unexpectedly hard passages, the sample answer is good, but for me personally, if I even read a couple of paragraphs into a passage and I find that I'm not getting it, I give myself permission to skip that passage until later. I personally find that plan works for me because it's better to lose 30 seconds reading a couple paragraphs only to skip it than it is to lose 10 minutes on a passage that's probably not going to earn me many points anyways. And again, the fact that my personal plan in this scenario deviates from what's on your screen underscores the fact that this exercise is all about developing your plan that works for you. Finally, jumping off the last prompt, let's take a moment and learn a great breathing exercise that you can do during the test itself whenever you're feeling overwhelmed or when you're losing focus. Specifically, what I'd like you to do, wherever you are, coffee shop, library, public or private, I don't care. Take your pen or pencil, put it on the desk in front of you, take your hands, put them on the table as well, feet flat on the floor, sit up straight. We're going to close our eyes. We're going to count backward from 5 while we take a big deep breath in and out. Now, as you do this, I want you to focus on the last time you were successful on an MCAT passage and question set. Feel those same feelings, that competence, that composure, that confidence that comes with being successful on the MCAT. Here we go. Don't make me be the only one doing this. Let's do this exercise now. And now let me ask you, after just 5 seconds break, how do you feel? Better? More relaxed? More composed? Ready to attack the next thing? That's the same way you're going to feel on test day after you take a 5-second breathing break as well. I personally did this in between every single passage just to give myself a chance to push the last passage out and focus on what was coming next. Give this a try on your next practice test and see if you don't feel more in control of your test taking. So in this lesson, we've covered a number of proactive drills and techniques for handling common stressors in MCAT prep. And on screen, you'll find that advice summarized. But to conclude, let's return to an idea mentioned at the beginning of this video. There are stressors that are under your control, and there are those that are not under your control. Now let me ask you, as we work through these last few exercises, as we proactively built a plan and attacked the things that we can control, during all that, how many times did you think about those factors that you cannot control? You see that taking control of your test prep is the best way to manage stress. It helps you handle the factors that are under your control, and it helps you forget about the things that you cannot control. So remember, a little bit of stress is healthy, helpful, and natural. It will help you succeed on test day. But when stress becomes overwhelming or out of control, the best way to handle the situation is always to be proactive about it. Taking charge of your preparation will help you manage the stressors that are in your control, and it will also help you forget about the stressors that you can't control. Good luck applying these principles to your test prep.